The gavel came down once, its crack loud and piercing, ringing out in the military courtroom at Fort Carson. Sergeant Sarah Hughes sat in the defendant's chair, her heart pounding, though her face remained serene. She felt the weight of every eye in the room on her, each one pinning her down like a heavy weight on her chest. The air was charged with tension, heavy enough to smother the weak. She could never have dreamed that she was here, charged with wearing a medal she had never received. A Navy cross shining under the unforgiving fluorescent lighting overhead. The prosecution did not waste any time. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Clark, standing tall and assertive, spoke to the room with a cold sneer. His voice echoed out, firm and calculated. "Your Honor, we stand before you today because Sergeant Hughes has stolen something much greater than a medal. She has stolen the pride of every soldier who earned that Navy cross. This," he held up the medal, his tone laced with disgust, "is an inexpensive imitation purchased online for $49. A murmur ran through the gallery. Sarah's heart fell, but she would not let it show. She had experienced worse. She knew how to be still, how to hold her ground, when the world around her seemed determined to destroy her. The facts were straightforward. The charge was accusatory. Sarah's service record was impeccable. No combat deployment. No acts of bravery. Only 4 years of supply duty. "Another phony hero!" someone muttered at the rear of the room. A shame. But Sarah didn't waver. She had discovered years before that silence was a sharper tool than outcry. Her hands lay quietly in her lap. However, the slight scarring on her wrists whispering a tale that no one had ever taken the time to hear. What no one in that room was aware of, what no one might have ever imagined, was that the case was about to turn in a completely different direction. The truth, the true truth, wasn't hidden in testimonies or paperwork. It was strolling down a Pentagon corridor, locked on a specific destination in this courtroom. The courtroom was filled with the scent of old wood and resolved. Outside, the tempest continued unabated, pounding the base with unremitting ferocity. But within, the air was heavy with expectation. Colonel Henry Grant, the chairman of the court, cleared his throat, his gavel still clutched in his hand. "This court will hear allegations of stolen valor against Sergeant Sarah Hughes," he stated, his tone firm but lacking in warmth. "She is accused of falsely wearing a Navy cross and describing special operations service." Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Clark stood firm, his confidence never faltering as he went on to present his argument. He was an experienced prosecutor, famous for his rock-solid calm and his capacity for making even the strongest of defendants stumble. Today, he had no desire to fail. This was an easy case, he reminded himself. There was no scope for doubt, no scope for mistake. He voice lifted in order to speak to the court once more. "Your Honor, the defendant has profited from wearing a medal she has no business wearing. A $49 Navy cross bought on the internet is not equal to the one won after years of service and sacrifice on the battlefield. This is the medal of a hero. But Sergeant Hughes has attributed heroism to herself that she has never attained. Her record is as transparent as the day. No war tours, no acts of valor, only 4 years of logistics service. This is the action of an imposter!" The gallery shifted uncomfortably, some expressions filled with disgust, others with incredulity. Sarah felt their gaze upon her, each one judging her in silence, each sentence like a slap to her face. Yet, still, she was calm, her hands clasped in her lap, her posture upright. She had learned long ago that silence could cut more cleanly than any sentences. The screen at the back of Lieutenant Colonel Clark came to life, and Sarah's record was displayed on the projector for all to view. Brooks! Sarah M. enlisted 2014, discharged 2018, logistics specialist. No combat awards other than the Army Commendation Medal. The record was incriminating. There it stood in black and white. Her whole military service spelled out, revealing only 4 years of supply duty. Nothing else? No combat deployments, no secret missions, no medals of honor. Clark addressed the jury and audience, ensuring that everybody could see the screen clearly. This is not a complicated case. Sergeant Hughes wore this medal to earn credibility she did not deserve. To purport to be something she has duped Not just the veterans she's purported to honor, but all of us. The gallery whispers became loud. Some nodded in agreement. Others grunted their dismay. The room erupted into a sea of murmurs. A disgrace. A voice shot out. A fraud? The second voice chimed in. While all this was going on, Sarah didn't move. Her eyes, which had been trained on the table, now locked with the glance of Lieutenant Colonel Clark for an instant. His superiority was evident, his assumption that the case would soon be closed. But Sarah knew something he did not. Something none of them did. Her wrist, which was parted from the rest of her sleeve, betrayed a small scar. Not any scar, but one that held a story that wasn't documented. A story nobody knew. A story that was now coming straight to the courtroom. Lieutenant Colonel Clark went on, displaying pictures of Sarah at different veteran events, smiling and sporting the Navy Cross proudly. Here, he stated triumphantly, is Sergeant Hughes in full uniform, proudly sporting the medal she bought over the internet. The truth is apparent. Your Honor, the picture stayed on the screen, where Sarah stood in a hall of veterans beside comrades who had won their medals the hard way. There was no shame visible in her face, only the quiet confidence of a woman who had always lived by the silence code. The gallery became increasingly agitated. Sarah could feel their eyes blazing against her skin, their judgment incinerating her. She had been warned this day would arrive, but nothing had prepared her for the enormity of it. Each whisper, each allegation seemed like 1,000 rocks flung at her. Do you have anything to say in your defense, Sergeant Hughes? Colonel Grant questioned, his tone firm, but no longer unaccompanied by a shade of interest. The room was completely silent. Every eye was focused on Sarah now. Elena had experienced this moment before, but it wasn't in a courtroom. It was in the stillness of a hospital room. It was in the quiet of a darkened room, where she stood up to the specters of her past. But this was different. This was an accusation, and the truth she bore wasn't for everyone. But it would have to be today. Sarah rose slowly, her legs cramped from hours spent sitting in the defendant's chair. She scanned the room, the public gallery full of individuals who had already made up their minds about her. She felt the warmth of their judgment, but she was not going to back down. Not now. Not when the truth was finally going to get heard. She raised her eyes, locking with Colonel Grant's, and then passing on to Lieutenant Colonel Clark's smug face. Her voice did not waver, was unsteady. My record of service speaks for itself, sir. The gallery erupted in laughter. The laughter was cruel. It reverberated off the walls of the courtroom. Lieutenant Colonel Clark's smirk became even more pronounced, knowing he had won. He had her now. The case was already finished in his mind. But then, just as the burden of their taunts had just started sinking in to Sarah, the door to the courtroom creaked open. The door creaked open, its harsh sound slicing into the laughter like a blade. For an instant, the din in the courtroom sputtered, as though collectively everyone had breathed in. The room descended into oppressive silence. 2 soldiers in immaculate dress blues came in first, walking with the air of unshakable command, their boots clicking smartly on the courtroom floor. Following them, another person walked in, one who immediately held the full attention of the room. General Patricia Stone, her 3 stars shining brightly on her uniform, stepped into the courtroom with a sort of presence that instantly changed the mood. The room seemed to reverberate with the weight of her authority. She strode ahead without hesitation, walking confidently and purposefully. Lieutenant Colonel Clark hesitated, his eyes opening wide as he took in the surprise visit. For the first time, his carefully built case appeared to wobble. General Stone, said Colonel Grant, standing up from his chair, his tone laced with incredulity. What are you doing here? But already General Stone was advancing, not inviting a reply. Her tone was quiet, but it contained an inescapable authority. Stay seated, Colonel, she instructed, her voice firm and absolute. The whole courtroom came to a standstill. Sarah's heart leapt with a new rush of hope as she turned her attention toward the general. Her heartbeat, now faster. Something had changed. She could not yet be sure what, but there was an air of calm power coming into the room, something that made the world pause for a brief moment. The gallery, previously abuzz with murmurs and accusation, was silent now. Even Lieutenant Colonel Clark, so confident in his triumph, was left speechless for a moment. General Stone directed her gaze to Clark, her piercing eyes, a spotlight shining upon him. "Tell me about this trial, Colonel," she demanded, her voice unyielding. Clark cleared his throat, steeling himself again, but his previous confidence appeared to fail him. He stood facing the general and started again, his words unsure as before. "General, Sergeant Hughes has gone to veteran functions, reporting to have been involved in operations she never was. Her record is spotless. Logistics operations, no combat, no heroism. She deceived by wearing a Navy cross in an attempt to earn credibility she is not entitled to." The room was quiet, all eyes on General Stone, anticipating what she would do next. But the general didn't budge for a moment. She just stared at Clark, her silence stronger than anything she could have said. At last, General Stone turned to Sarah. Theirs met. There was no censure in Stone's eyes, no accusation, just comprehension. "Sergeant Hughes, do you know why I'm here?" General Stone's tone was even, but it carried an unmistakable gravity. Sarah breathed deeply. "No, ma'am," she answered, her voice firm, in spite of the hurricane of feelings raging within her. Without dropping her eyes, General Stone pulled from her coat a well-worn velvet box. She put it down carefully in front of the judge, and the room waited with bated breath as she pushed it open, slowly. Within the case was a Navy cross, but this was no ordinary medal. It was distinctive. It bore a particular engraving dat and classified operational code on its face. The gallery gasped as one. Some jumped up, their eyes wide with disbelief. "This," General Stone declared, her tone resolute and unshakable, "is Sergeant Hughes's medal. It was received by her while in Operation Silent Thunder, a covert operation in Syria. Sergeant Hughes rescued 18 civilians and obtained vital intelligence that averted a terrorist attack." The room broke out into whispers. The accusations, the suspicions, the accusations of deception. All of it seemed to disintegrate at once. Truth had finally been uncovered. Lieutenant Colonel Clark blanched. His voice broke as he attempted to answer. "General, respectfully, no woman has ever been on those missions. It's impossible," he stuttered. General Stone moved a step closer to Clark. She dominated the space. "That is an incorrect statement, Colonel," she spoke, her voice slicing through the courtroom with precision. "And that is why Sergeant Hughes's service was classified. She never purported to be special forces. Others made assumptions, but those were false." She turned to the gallery, her eyes scanning the room. "Sergeant Hughes was part of a program so sensitive that even most flag officers never heard about it," she went on. "The reality, as painful as it is that she acted with integrity. And now, due to ignorance and arrogance, she's been brought before this court, charged with being an imposter, all for speaking truth. She was never allowed to speak." As the courtroom cleared, Sarah felt the weight of the past few days. The tension, the fear, the humiliation start to fall away. She had stood against charges that had sought to strip her of her dignity, her honor, her identity. But now, she stood tall. Not for a medal, not for the approval of others, but because she had won that much sooner by the deeds that had been concealed from the world. General Stone, remaining at the front of the courtroom, faced Sarah as she departed. Her voice remained gentle, but it still contained power. "Sergeant Hughes, you're not alone anymore," she said, her eyes meeting Sarah's. "You never were, but now the world will know what you've done!" Sarah nodded, the words sinking into her heart. It was all over. The lie had been revealed. The truth had been spoken. And even though the wounds of what she had endured would never truly heal, she was no longer defined by the accusations made against her. The storm had passed. As Sarah exited the courtroom, the outside air was different. The weight that had been so heavy on her chest now was lifted. The sky had cleared of gray clouds, and the sun was shining brightly. She felt a stillness creep over her. For the first time in a while, Sarah felt free. But the trip wasn't done. Battles remained to be waged. Truths to be revealed. The world had gotten it wrong about her, but now it was time to reveal the true tale. As Sarah descended the stairs, she heard the soft echo of footsteps following her. Captain David Fields, her loyal companion, throughout the entire trial, was now walking with her. He didn't have to speak. The admiration in his eyes conveyed it all. "You did it, Sarah," he simply stated. For the first time, she smiled. It was tiny, but it was genuine. The world had been mistaken. But Sarah Hughes knew that all along. And now, everyone else needed to know it as well. Stepping out into the warm afternoon sunshine, Sarah was able to breathe with relief at last. The truth was victorious. And for the first time in many years, she was finally able to stand tall and free, without fear, knowing that the weight of the world could never crush her spirit.